Let's go through some of these injuries here. Sam Darnold. What's going on with Sam Darnold? We heard mono. How what is it with mono that keeps people from playing? How severe is it? And is this just something that he can play through, or is this something that is pretty severe?
I think with mono, especially with football players, it's kind of a joke. How haha he's kissing someone, and now he has mono, because you think of it as like a disease you get in high school. But mononucleosis is actually a really serious infection that can be especially dangerous to athletes and contact athletes, especially. What happens is part of, not necessarily all of it. I'm not going to go into the whole epidemiology of mononucleosis. You have Google, you can look that stuff up. But one of the symptoms is that your spleen actually swells up, and athletic activity, which causes high impact to that area, could put the athlete at serious risk for the spleen rupturing, which is clearly a very, very serious situation. That is the reason that most physicians put kind of 3 weeks away from athletics as part of the plan to when an athlete gets mononucleosis, to kind of protect them from their spleen basically rupturing while they play. They're waiting for that inflammation and swelling to come back down, which puts it farther into and puts it more into its natural position, which is a little bit more padded than when it gets swollen up. And then once the fever subsides, then usually the docs will clear them to go back to playing. Right now, I think week 5 is kind of the soonest that we can expect Darnold to return. That's after that 3-week window where that swelling is most prominent. Again, it's very serious, but it's also one of those things that you don't see very often. So I don't think a lot of people understand just how serious it could be. So again, it doesn't mean that the good news is that it's not something that is likely to come back. So it's not something that increases his risk for the rest of the season, like a sprain or a strain would. It's just one of those kind of fluky things where we're probably going to miss him for a month just because he got this condition.
Okay, see, this is all news to me because I didn't know that that mono really affected your spleen in that way, and that it was so dangerous to, especially in a contact sport like this, that it would be so dangerous to kind of push the envelope there, so to speak. So it sounds like a best case scenario is week 5. What do you think worst case scenario would be for a guy like Darnold with this?
Obviously, the infection has to go through its full course. So usually 3 to 4 weeks is all it takes. If the infection lingers, you could be talking 5, 6, 7, but it's very unlikely with somebody that's getting, basically the best care that you can get. It's very unlikely. They caught it early. They knew exactly what it was. He started getting the antibiotics and the treatments for it. Very unlikely that it goes much longer than 3 to 4 weeks.
Okay, so that's the window that we're looking for with Darnold. That's excellent news. At least we know what we can expect with Darnold. What about Trevor Siemian? We saw he kind of stepped in to fill that role, and that injury did not look good. It looked pretty ugly here. Are we expecting Trevor Siemian back to be able to step in and replace some of the missed time by Darnold, or is this going to be a long-term thing?
No, Trevor Siemian is out for the year. His ankle kind of exploded, which is never a good sign when your ankle moves the way that his did. I believe it was a dislocation posteriorly, which is kind of a rare. Normally, when you see a dislocation of the ankle, it's because it got twisted, like somebody fell. A lot of times you'll see that when people tackle people from behind, their foot kind of gets wrapped up and then their leg twists kind of a funky direction. Tyler Eifert had that happen to him. OBJ a couple years ago had the same thing. That's what you typically would expect with an ankle dislocation. With Siemian's, it was kind of a weird mechanism where basically he got hit and stepped backwards, and his leg kept going backwards when it dislocated. So very possible that he has a fracture. Regardless, we haven't really heard much about what's actually wrong with the ankle, but I can tell you that he will not be playing again this year as they get that kind of addressed. Until Darnold comes back, it looks like Luke Falk is the guy that's going to be the starter for the Jets. Not exactly what you want to hear for a third stringer, but I didn't think he played too horribly once he came in for Simeon last week. I think he completed like 20 something passes out of 20, like 21 out of 26. So no touchdowns or anything, but I really felt like he looked serviceable as a backup quarterback. So we'll have to see this week. I'm pretty sure he starts against the Patriots, which is not the defense that you want a guy that's making his first NFL start to have to go through, but that's where we're at.
Yeah, not an ideal situation for Luke Falk, and it was a pretty conservative game plan on Monday when he did have to come in, which you would kind of expect at that point. But to his credit, he definitely did look decent. I mean, he made the throws that he was allowed to make, took the checkdowns that were there. So let's go to the next player here, and we got Devin Singletary. This is a guy that a lot of people have been excited about. He was a rookie. He's a rookie this year. He came into Buffalo. He actually looked good during his playing time. Looked like this was a guy that was building some momentum to actually, garner some playing time and maybe even be a guy that you can count on in your flex position. What's going on with him? It sounds like he's injured as well. What can we expect from Devin Singletary?
Singletary's dealing with a hamstring strain, which is never a good thing when you talk about a guy that relies on basically accelerating quickly. So hamstring strains, we've seen them just absolutely derail promising seasons. Last year, it was Dalvin Cook, Leonard Fournette. This year, obviously, Singletary is dealing with one. He's missed practice now for 2 days in a row, Wednesday and Thursday. Unless he practices on Friday, I really don't think we end up seeing Singletary this week, which means it could be the Frank Gore show. And that is not ideal. But again, I think it speaks more to the fact that I just don't expect Singletary to play. And I think that Josh Allen might have to carry a little bit of the rushing load this week as well.
Oh, I think we know that he's more than capable of doing that. Now, my question for you is, if Singletary does get in a limited practice on Friday, would he be, and he were available to suit up, would you expect him to be limited this week?
I don't know, because we haven't really seen him take over as a bell cow back as far as just touches. He hasn't had a ton of touches. So could he be limited in his explosion? Yes. Could he still see even more workload than what he saw last week? Also, yes. So I think that it's one of those situations where you're not going to be able to tell if they are taking it easy with him, because we've never actually seen them give him the reins, give him the football, 20 times in a game. I think he's only had like 9 carries. So the fact that we haven't seen him take a full workload means that even if they're reducing his workload from what they had hoped that he would be at by week 3, we won't really know. So it's possible that he plays really well on limited snaps again, but it's also possible that he has a pretty rough week just because he doesn't have that explosion that he had in weeks 1 and 2, where he was making some big plays.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. Not knowing what his role is going to be and knowing that he hasn't had that type of role, where he dominates touches. Yeah, it'll be hard to know. Maybe if he does play, maybe we can expect those 8 to 9 touches still, because it's not too, overly using him, even if he is hurt. So let's go on to the next player. We got David Njoku, and the hit he took Monday night. Ethan, it did not look good. I mean, he got upended. He landed directly on his head. You could see his neck kind of hit, and it sounds like he hurt his wrist as well. What's going on with David Njoku? Is there multiple injuries here? Is it just the one? And what can we expect out of him moving forward?
Initially, I think the reports were that Njoku was just dealing with a concussion, which is kind of expected when a guy that big falls that far directly on his head. That was the one that I think everyone was more concerned about. Oh, he's got a concussion. We have to make sure that he clears concussion protocol and all these things. But then by Tuesday, it comes out, there's some rumblings that it's not just a concussion. He actually has possibly a very serious wrist injury as well. So he gets flipped on his head, like you said. I've watched it a couple times, but I haven't watched it since all the news about his wrist came out to see if that was all on the same play, or maybe he hit his wrist the play before. I'm not entirely sure, but I can tell you that the the wrist is the thing that's going to keep him out longer than the concussion will. They're talking about possibly making him have surgery for the wrist. He's getting second and third opinions, is like all these guys do when they have to end up having surgery. Usually that means that the first opinion they got was not an opinion that they liked. So they're trying to find someone else that says, oh, no, you don't need to have surgery. You'll be good to go in 3 weeks, not 4 weeks. The timeline that they gave him if he had surgery was 4 weeks, but we have seen this with wrists before. David Johnson is kind of a textbook example where, he had wrist surgery and then he didn't get back in like the 5 to 7 weeks that they came out with. For whatever reason, the timelines, especially this year, I feel like in reports, are very generous. I haven't agreed with a lot of them. I talked about it last week. I talked about it again this week a few times, where it's just like, man, 4 weeks. If they immobilize his wrist for 3 weeks, it only takes 2 days for muscle atrophy to occur. So basically your muscles weakness to creep in. It only takes 2 days of not moving. So if you're immobilized for even 2 weeks, it's going to take some time to get basically that wrist moving the way that it was before, and doing so in a quick fashion is, I don't know, man. I just feel like this 4 weeks is very generous. I'm going to say it's probably closer to six weeks. Maybe even creeping towards 7 or 8. Demetrius Harris is the kind of the tight end that's going to take the majority of the work now from Njoku, and he's going to get the call. So he'd be a guy that I think I've picked up in a couple leagues where I'm just not really doing anything well at tight end. Maybe you have an OJ Howard like I do in Scott Fishbowl, and you're just really just looking anywhere for somebody that's going to catch footballs because OJ Howard hasn't been doing it. So Demetrius Harris is a guy that if you're in a situation like that, you could look to maybe make some plays, because he definitely has the profile of someone that could make some plays in an offense.
Yeah, we saw some shades of that in Kansas City when Harris was there. We just didn't see it very often with Travis Kelce being there. So it's interesting that he finally kind of gets a chance here. It'll be interesting to see what he does with that. But the main thing that I take away from this is, if you have Njoku, you gotta figure something out at tight end in fantasy, because it sounds like he's going to be unavailable for quite some time when he does come back. Especially with the wrist, like you said, there's some uncertainty with the timeline there. If he does come back, we don't know how effective he's going to be. Just coming off of that surgery as well. So that's some eye-opening news there. Let's get to the Kansas City running backs, because this is a lot of people are heavily invested in that Kansas City backfield. And it sounds like LaShawn McCoy and Damian Williams are dealing with injuries. McCoy, we heard, did get in a limited practice Thursday, so there's some hope for him. Damian Williams hasn't practiced. Last we heard, he's walking with a noticeable limp. What's going on with these guys, and what can we expect as far as time missed, or if McCoy is out there, can we expect to use him or what?
Yes, I mean, I think if one of those guys plays, the one that's more likely to play is McCoy. He's dealing with an ankle sprain. He did miss practice, like you said. He got a limited practice in on Thursday, which is always a good sign. His MRI came back negative, so they're not dealing with any major damage to his ankle. I think that McCoy ends up suiting up for this one. Williams, I'm a little bit more concerned about. He has a knee sprain. He hasn't been practicing this week. No good reports coming out. Like you said, the limp is noticeable. I always kind of take that with a grain of salt, because it's just like with AJ Green, who came out. Oh, well, a reporter came out and said, oh, well, he's running at full speed and he doesn't have a limp. Well, I'm sorry, this isn't a bash on reporters, but they're not trained to pick up on the subtleties of a limp. There's a lot that goes into gait and understanding how it works. And the majority of reporters just see a guy running fast and think, oh, he's totally good. He's good to go. I didn't see a limp. And in reality, you're not really looking for a limp. You're looking for those very subtle things that would indicate that they're favoring that side still. And I just don't think very many reporters can actually do that. So the point of all that was that this Williams knee strain or sprain, whatever he's dealing with his knee, appears to be much more serious than what McCoy is dealing with. So I don't expect Williams to play. I do expect McCoy to play, but I think that McCoy is going to be spelled a little bit with Darwin Thompson, who I think just given the fact that that offense just cannot be stopped right now, is a very sneaky flex play this week, especially in DFS if you're trying to save a little bit of cash in your lineup. Darwin Thompson could be a guy that sees significant amounts of work that you wouldn't have to really necessarily pay up for.
Okay, so yeah, what we can expect out of that Kansas City backfield is interesting. Always something to monitor with those guys. Playing Baltimore this week, though, so maybe temper some expectations no matter who you play out of them. Sterling Shepard, what's going on with Sterling Shepard? We heard last week you report on him. What's going on this week with him?
Yeah, Shepard actually got some good news this week. He actually cleared his concussion protocol on Thursday, so and now he's practicing in full. So very unlikely that he misses the game Sunday. I expect him to play.
Huge news for my guy Daniel Jones, another weapon that's healthy that he can throw the ball to. He needs all the help he can get with as injured as that team is and that offensive line. So let's go to another player who was dealing with concussion injuries. This is a guy who we are growing accustomed to seeing dealing with concussion issues, unfortunately, and that's Jordan Reed. What can we expect from Jordan Reed this week? Anything, or is he's still struggling with that?
Yeah, Jordan Reed is not actually cleared concussion protocol yet. Again, I talked much more on this last week, so go back and listen to those pods. But this is his 7th concussion, and I'm still concerned about his health. I think the team is going, this is one of those players like Jordan Reed are what is getting the NFL in trouble with a lot of these, the organizations that look and say, you're not taking player safety into account. And it's because the more research that we get on concussions and the severity and the long lasting effects after they get done playing football, the more you see basically this, when you see players like Reed who have had so many reported concussions that are documented that we know he had it, the NFL is going to get scrutinized if they bring those types of guys back too soon. So I do not expect him to play again this week. I think we could be talking multiple weeks from now before they actually say, okay, well, we gave him a whole month off. Normally we can get him back in a week. But because of his circumstances. And the other thing we don't know about Reed is if he is still having concussion symptoms, we might not see him at all this year. We have seen in the past guys with multiple concussions. They get hit hard enough, and then we're talking months and months of them having symptoms, and no team doctor is going to put a guy that is still complaining of these symptoms back on the field because it's actually gross negligence to do so. I just feel like with Reed, you're hoping at 4 weeks that I hope he clears soon because that means that he's not having the symptoms and things. But I mean, we could be talking end of the year before we actually hear anything about him coming back. So again, it's a lot trickier situation because it's just the history is there.
Yeah, and a lot of these lawsuits are centered around the concussions and just brain got to be playing a factor for a player who's had so many concussions. Like you said, notated concussions, basically recorded concussions. This has to be something that they really are going to push to go slow on. So that makes total sense to me. Ethan, before I let you go, there's one more player I want to touch on, and that's Marlon Mack. Marlon Mack is a guy who a lot of people have been relying on this year, early in the year to provide some fantasy points, and he left with an injury. What's going on with him? Is he going to be back this week?
Mac's been dealing with a calf strain. He actually hasn't practiced yet this week, but there are some newer reports saying that he was working on a side field. So he's trying to get back to the point where he's practicing. If he gets a limited practice in on Friday, I think we could see him playing. If he does not practice again on Friday, there's a very good chance that he misses Sunday's game. So that's one that I'll be kind of updating people as we go. But if he hasn't practiced up by Friday, I really don't expect him to play on Sunday.
Interesting. So keep Jordan Wilkins and Nyheim Hines in our thoughts as if Marlon Mack does miss. Those are guys that could benefit, especially because Naheem Hines is a pass catching back, and in the matchup that he currently has, pass catching backs normally do very well. So that's all great news, Ethan. Thank you so much for providing all that for us. Tune in next week where Ethan will again break down our injuries, and we're going to throw it back to you, John.